Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to PTV World. You're watching Views on News with me, Tayyaba Nisar Khan. We're going to talk about very significant three topics. The first is going to be something very significant, the wrapping up of the COP-27, the very esteemed and very significant climate change conference which was being held at Sharm El-Sheikh in Egypt. And of course, we know the Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, was taking up the case of Pakistan, holding up against the states of the world, where of course he was demanding the climate justice in itself and also the reparations for the climate laws to developing countries as well. Not just the case of Pakistan in itself, but also the case of the entire world as well. We will be talking about the other two topics as well later on. But of course, this is something very significant because of course, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif himself was really hailed by the other world leaders as well as being one of the emerging leaders who was really forcefully being taking up the case, and not just taking up the case, but also having the extraordinary gesture by going to the flooded areas of Pakistan and being the one who was the man at the front, leading Pakistan in the forefront of the battle against flooding as well. And of course, the UN chief himself has said as well, quote unquote, that the world is on the highway to the climate hell. Of course, the world is on the highway to the climate of hell if we do not ensure that we try to bring in those recommendations, bring in those solutions, tech-related solutions, other IT-related solutions, and not just that, the world coming up collectively together to talk about this issue, raising it at the World Forum, and also not just raising it, but also taking concrete actions on that as well. Prime Minister was able to do that as well. Let's take a look at this report that has been prepared, and then we'll be right back.
Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has wrapped up his two-day visit to Egypt after attending the Sharm El-Sheikh Climate Implementation Summit COP-27. While talking about his successes he gathered at the summit, he tweeted that he urged the world to wake up to the defining challenge of climate change in terms of translating commitments into real-life outcomes. He added that for a transformational shift in the flow of capacities, finances and technology to deal a decisive blow to the challenge of the climate change. In another tweet, he said that at a high-level segment of COP27, he presented flood devastation in Pakistan as an example of what climate change can do to a country and drew the attention of the global leaders to the need of bridging massive financing gaps and inclusion of loss and damage in the agenda. Minister of Information and Broadcasting Maryam Aurangzeb termed Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's visit to Egypt as fruitful and said that it was the first time that fiscal impact of the climate change on the developing countries was recognized. She added that there was also an unprecedented international consensus to compensate the developing countries through provision of financial resources.
Of course, the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was also being the co-chair of one of the conferences there as well, which of course was a roundtable conference, climate change and sustainability of the vulnerable communities, something very, very at the heart of Pakistan as well, very dear to Pakistan as well. And not just that, he also participated in the other side conferences and the other conferences arranged by the United Nations Secretary General himself and the others as well. And he had many bilateral meetings as well, the NGI, Middle East Green Initiative, and amongst them, many others as well. Now we've been joined by guests in the studio as well as on Skype. Let me introduce you to them as well. Mr. Amir Hussain, who's a senior journalist, thank you so much for coming to our show. Mr. Aniq Zafar, who's a political analyst, thank you so much for joining us as well. And of course, we've been joined on Skype by Dr. Ejaz Ahmad, who is an environmentalist and of course something very important for his topic as well, which is of course the COP27. Now, let's first go to Mr. Amir Hussain. Of course, you know, you're a senior journalist yourself. You know that Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has really been taking up the case of Pakistan, and not just that, there's a divide between the global south and the global north, and he's really raising the voice for the collective global south as well, all the developing countries. And in COP27 we saw how effective the voice of the global south was. They were angry. They were angry about not being given the climate reparations as well. And Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif himself was given the label of being extraordinary at the summit in itself as well. So of course, what was Pakistan's stance, and do you think he was able to achieve all of that forcefully?
Well, I think there were some remarkable achievements in terms of building a discourse from the global south, because the global south is the recipient of the all climate related disasters, despite the fact that we contribute very little to the global pollution. And I think the climate justice debate was very much put together. And one of the most important things for this time, we have seen all the COP 26, 25 and others as well, but reparation and compensating for all that provision of financial resources was one of the most important areas which was emphasized in this debate and this discussion, and it was brought forth to the public and discussion debate. And international, of course, there was global South North consensus, international consensus that the developing country must be provided with financial resources to mitigate the environmental cost that we are undergoing. I think that was an important achievement in terms of building this consensus. Though the global North, which is responsible for lot of emissions in the global climate, were also brought to the table to realize and to commit resources, and also commit for the policy formulation, discourse building, and also going forward for a better and equitable world where people who suffer have something to to offer from the global North.
Right, policy formation, the equitability, the equality among the states as well, especially equity among the states is very significant, because of course the vulnerable developing countries are the ones who are taking the brunt of all this transnational global issue of the climate crisis as well. Mr. Aniq, Zafar, of course we know that there was a lot of talk about climate justice, a lot of spearheading of that by our own Prime Minister in Pakistan as well. The Foreign Minister was there, the Climate Change Minister was there, the Information Minister was there. They were all very forcefully taking up the issue of the climate justice, the debt relief, and the debt reparations as well. What is your opinion on the international community taking heed to this particular topic?
Well, as we know that this summer we received heavy rains in south of Pakistan, and those ignited this debate that how global south or the countries like Pakistan who are poorer, who do not have that kind of carbon footprint as the richer countries have, but the climate is impacting all these countries which do not have the resources to mitigate the disaster or start reconstruction and rebuilding damages caused by climate change. As we are aware that $30 billion is the estimated cost of rebuilding and reconstruction in the areas which were severely impacted by heavy rains and floods. So before this conference, the question how the global North how the global North should contribute towards rebuilding and reconstruction of the global South, countries like Pakistan, was not on the agenda as such. In this conference, we have been able to bring it to the agenda, and and the world community is now going to work on the model. What model will be adopted to create that global shield, global risk shield against climate change for the developing countries. I think this is a big success for Pakistan and for the developing countries. Also, I think we should not undermine or ignore the fact that Pakistan is also keen to work with the Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arab, for the Middle East Green Initiative, because it is the mean temperature of the region which impacts the whole region. As many studies are indicating that over the next 2 decades, the mean temperature of Middle East and mean temperature of South Asia is likely to rise significantly. So the Green Initiative of Middle East, we should be working, we are keen to work very closely with them, with the Saudis, so that the mean temperature of the region can be controlled, or at least it should not rise as much as being predicted in the current circumstances.
Also, the objectives of the Middle East Green Initiative really coincide with the objectives of Pakistan as well, the Forestation Initiative as well, the 2016 initiative of Greenpeace as well. This is all very important and significant for Pakistan as well. Let's talk about the damage that the floods of Pakistan this year they have caused. Of course, we know that the rainfall was a lot more than expected, a lot more than anticipated. It was 500% more than anticipated, which is a huge percentage advantage. And this shows that this is not just Pakistan's issue, because Pakistan produces less than 1% of the total global carbon emissions, and yet is one of the 8 most vulnerable countries as well. Mr. Dr. Ejaz Ahmad, let's come to you as well now. So much damage has been seen, so much damage that it is unfortunate to see not many countries still coming up and giving the pledge that they had pledged as well. We haven't been able to, we are garnering a lot of support, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to keep our point of contact and point of media attention towards that as well. I want to come to you and ask you how Pakistan can initiate the loss and damage in a way that the international community actually comes and takes heed towards this.
Well, I think this is very important aspect because Pakistan has suffered, and it is not the first time that they have suffered. We have been actually going through this whole disasters for last 2.5 decades. Although this was very severe, the intensity was very high, and even the monsoon ranges, which was limited to certain area, this time these rains, unexpected rains, they crossed the monsoon ranges as well. And despite of the fact that the United Nations Secretary General of United Nations General Assembly asked for the support for Pakistan from developing countries, and his visit was very crucial and very important, instrumental in bringing some of the resources that are required. But ultimately, nothing of that kind of support which was expected came to Pakistan. I think we need to strengthen the lobbying, and it is all political lobbying, which plays very important role, because most of the countries, the developed countries, they think that these losses are not up to that level which have been assessed. So the independent assessment made by the World Bank shows it's 33 billion US dollars. But still, I think this is a good opportunity, and Prime Minister is already, had meetings with so many global leaders, and presented the case very well to the community. And now even the Secretary General in his speech, and many other actually head of the states in their speeches, they mentioned the disaster that has happened to Pakistan, and it is expected that these people, those who are making decision in the Western world, in the developed countries, they will be able to provide support. In addition, I think Pakistan has an opportunity in a sense that they are at the moment chairing the G77 group, which is again another, I think, strength, political strength. This will help in bringing the case, in lobbying the developed world for more support. As you mentioned, that although we are not the contributor, but we are suffering, and this is happening for last many years.
Right. Of course, there was a lot of talk about capacity building as well, finance and technological sharing as well, in order to curb this as well. One of the agenda of the COP-27 itself was the adaptation.
Yes.
Many people are saying that now, since this climate change is a reality, we should welcome the floods rather than trying to restrict them, because this is going to be the new reality as well. Do you think Pakistan is going to be able to build capacity for itself, or ask and demand the international community to build the capacity to be able to welcome the floods in the future?
Well, I think this is also an important discussion, that we need to look these floods as an opportunity as well, because Pakistan is a water-stressed country, and over a period of time, these are, at some point, these are opportunities as well. So Pakistan need to look into the number one, building the capacity, and also I think another very important aspect is technology. We don't have that kind of technology which will help us in building the infrastructure which is more climate resilient, the infrastructure which is more environmental friendly and supportive of to the environment, instead of like having the traditional way of building the infrastructure, which may not be very supportive for the environment. So capacity is an area where we need to look. I think if we see the examples of the region, Bangladesh has built the capacity where they are coping with such situation quite well. We need to learn from, say, Holland as a good example, where they have managed to take like technology to the level that they are not suffering much from the disasters that from the floods that they actually get. So there are, I think, ways, and there is a need to build relationship with those countries which are quite good. And Germany, for example, is a good example where they have actually been able to develop the solar energy technology, and that technology, the cost of the technology has reduced tremendously. So we need to look into that, and then instead of buying the stuff from them, we need to ask them to transfer the technology to Pakistan instead of like purchasing the solar panels, etc.
Right. Also, can we talk about the transferring of the climate credits as well? Of course, we know that there is a private sector investment that has to be taken care of as well, because that's one of the very significant ones as well. The industrialized world, the MNCs, the large industries, they are still not curbing the limits in their carbon emissions. So do you think there can be a way to ensure that they give us and transfer us the climate credits?
I think this is a way where we need to approach some of these MNCs, because budget of some of the MNCs are more than the budget of Pakistan maybe. And they are big polluter as well. Although they are doing some of the efforts to minimize their footprint, but generally, if we see, still their footprint is much higher than any country in the region which is in the development phase. So the multinationals needs to be approached, and then I think there has to be some mechanism which should be developed. Those, for example, we have this polluter pay principle, where if you are polluting the environment at a certain level, you are supposed to contribute for the betterment of environment as well. So we need to look into these aspects, and then come up with certain, for example, there was a clean development mechanism, CDMs. The projects were actually sponsored by different multinationals. Similarly, we can approach them and find out what kind of support they can provide to rebuild, reconstruct Pakistan. And I would also like to add one more point, that the main focus of this COP-27 was, from our point of view, related to loss and damages, because we have been suffering for last 2 to 3 decades because of the developed world, whatever they have done, because of their footprints are too high, that we are facing the brunt. And the mechanism needs to be developed. The last, I think, 2 COPs, they have been talking about, like providing $100 billion US dollars per year to the yes. But what happened? Even it was the most difficult thing to bring this loss and damage into the agenda. Only on Sunday they agreed to have this loss and damage as part of the agenda of the COP-27. So I think we have to look for political lobbying and come up with certain partnership with the developed world and find out solutions which are actually required before it is too late.
Right, you really rightly mentioned how political lobbying is very significant in all of this matter as well, because of course in the COP15 the 100 billion pledge was made as well. It's still not realized yet. The international community is not paying much heed, and only on Sunday the loss and damage addenda was added as well, despite the discussions being taken place back in July and led by, of course, Pakistan as well, under the chairperson of Pakistan in the G77 plus China group as well. But how can we ensure that all the developing states, they had a very, very direct and assertive stance in this COP27, but yet the international community still seems, the developed world still seems to not give a lot of heed towards this as well. How can we collaborate and collectively, the entire global south and developing countries, try and put pressure, exert the pressure on the developed states?
I think the realization is one aspect which is important, and now we know that this year Pakistan has gone through, the drought phase, the Gulf incidences, forest fires. More than I think 400 forest fires we have observed during this summer, and then this flood, super flood actually. But then if we see what happened in Europe during this summer, the temperature went up to 40 degrees, and then there was a very severe issue among the communities, among the people, especially in UK. So they have started realizing some of the damages, and they have started facing it. So ultimately, I think realization have started. That is why they agreed to put it in the agenda. Before that, it was even very difficult for them to realize that this is happening, and also they felt that it is happening in South Asia or in Asian countries or African countries. So they're least concerned about it. So now I think after the realization, they have started agreeing on developing some sort of funds and developing mechanism. But I would say that it will take another 3 to 5 years when we start looking for some funds which are coming. In the meantime, what Pakistan can do is to start talking to the countries, the Western world, and also the developed countries to look for debt swap, because that is a mechanism which is much easier. And we know there are examples in Pakistan when about a decade ago, Italian government they come up with this Pak Italian debt swap agreement, where they have actually allowed the government of Pakistan to spend the money on natural resource management and on environment.
Dr.
So similarly, we can lobby.
Right, absolutely. Debt swap is something really significant as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Ejaz. Of course, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has been very forcefully, very assertively taking up the stance as well. One of the few interesting points were, of course, the mechanism and structure for climate financing being developed as well. The debt swaps that were talked about by Dr. Ejaz himself right now as well. And of course, the climate assessment, risk assessment index, which he urged to be created as well, to see which countries are on the top of the climate emission and the carbon emission as well. We'll be back with the new topics, the different topics after this short break. Welcome back to News on Views with Tayyaba Nisar Khan. Now we're going to talk about an international topic, a global topic, and of course regarding the North American country, the United States of America. The midterm election, that is something very significant, but everybody says that there are a lot of elections in the United States because every 2 years there's an election. But of course the presidential election is after every 4 years, but every 2 years there's a midterm election that also reflects to the performance of the president as well, and of course very significant for both the houses because because US, of course, when it was created back in 1700s, it was decided that it's going to be a bicameral legislature as well, with the Senate and the House of Representatives as well. The House of Representatives has about 435 seats, and the Senate has about 100 seats. And right now, 35 out of 100 seats are very, very significant, and that is what everybody is actually taking a look at. The House of Representatives has 23 seats, which the Democrats are trying to eye. On the contrary, in the Senate, 26 seats have to be defended by the Democrats, and they have to win 2 additional seats to have more control in both the houses as well. And of course, having more control would mean that Nancy Pelosi would continue to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives as well, and the Republican Speaker is not going to be nominated after that. Many predictions are saying that the Democrats might likely win as well, which they're calling the blue wave. And of course, previously in many elections as well, for instance, the time of Mr. Barack Obama, the President of the United States, the ex-President of the United States, he lost the midterm elections, and then of course in the next elections he lost as well. So a lot of control was taken away from him, the Republican Party, and then of course Trump came along, Donald Trump, the president, came along as well. But then of course there's a lot of debate on the swing states in the United States of America that has been happening as well. A very different form of elections that happens, very different from Pakistan, very different from the other countries as well. They go on the electoral college, and each state has 1 vote, and that is very, very significant as well. And many things come and arise from that as well, such as gerrymandering and so many other things, the redistricting and so many other issues as well. But of course, we're going to go towards our esteemed panel right now. Mr. Amir Hussain, who has joined us, who's a senior journalist, and Mr. Aniq, Zafar, the political analyst. They have continued to join us as well from the previous discussion as well. Let's go on to Mr. Aniq Zafar. Let's talk about how significant this win is for the Democrats themselves. We know that they need 23 seats in the House of Representatives. They need to defend the 26 in the Senate, plus win 2. Do you think it's going to have an impact?
So far the results and the polls, exit polls, indicate that Democrats may not be able to hold House of Representatives. The House of Representatives may go to the Republicans, but the Democrats may maintain a thin majority in the Senate. So this will be a very interesting situation, because in the last 2 years, Obama administration has enjoyed a majority both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, the upper house. So there was a significant legislative agenda which Obama, Mr. Biden's administration managed to push through. But going forward, there will be some problems if the House of Representatives is not held by the Democrats. In that case, obviously, Nancy Pelosi will lose the chair, and a Republican will hold that. Till the last results, it was like 198 seats are with the Republicans, and the Democrats are somewhere around 174, and the majority is at 218. So let's see what happens, but there will be repercussions for Biden administration. There will be a lot of deadlocks. There will be deadlocks over budgets. There will be, because as you know, there is always a debate between the Democrats and Republicans.
Absolutely. How
much the state must spend, which programs the state must spend. So these kind of, and taxation issues, of course. The Republicans like to give big tax cuts to the big corporates, and Democrats like to impose tax on them and spend on public welfare or government schemes. So let's see what happens. But on the face of it, right now, it seems that the Biden administration will have some issues going forward for the next 2 years.
Right, very interesting take as well. And of course, you've highlighted the tax cuts as well. And that brings us to the economic question. Of course, we know that the Ukraine-Russia war is going on right now. A lot of worldwide global inflation is happening. The US is taking the brunt of it as well. There is a lot of economic issues. A lot of living costs have been increased as well in the United States of America. And of course, the tax cut debate is also very, very significant. How significant do you think the win for Democrats, or if the Republicans win in the House of Representatives, is going to bring for the economy of the US?
Well, I think, yes, there will be strong implications for the economy, because the US economy for some years is in recession, because it's not growing at par with the global competitiveness that China is doing in other countries. But I think again we have to see that there are two ideological debates that are going on. The Democrats are more towards center to left, and you have the Republican left to right, center to right. The Republicans would be more interested in new liberal economics, which is more about cut on public welfare, focusing more on market-driven economy, the growth dynamics and all that. The Democrats will be more into public welfare, social services and all that, and increasing the state responsibility to take care of the citizens and providing safety nets and social protection as well. So I think this is, while the US economy is under recession, it is very important to come out of this crisis. Whenever US economy goes into recession, they follow the Keynesian model, which is the Keynesian model is more about bringing in state and bailing out the small.
And there's a lot of criticism on that as well, because the state is a lot involved, and they are talking about the socialist concepts as well.
Well, I think when the economy is in recession, because the brunt is borne by the poor and the marginalized communities. So they need some sort of protection in order to sustain their lives at the minimum level. So that is where Democrats were pushing towards. But of course, the American system is so complex that it's not evenly poised. If you look at the elections, we will see the results in coming days. But I think the trend is going on. This will be a very hang situation, because no one will have the majority to take decisions. The legislation is important, and the Senate is very powerful in America.
Right.
The senators, the 100 senators who are there, they have the legislative power, they have the executive power, they have the powers to impeach the president. Even it's a huge. And
there's a check and balance system in the US.
And also the senators, unlike our system, they are directly elected through the people, not indirectly elected. So I think this in Senate, if you have 51 votes or more, then you are safe, and in the House of Representatives you have to have a simple majority as well. So I think this is where the Biden will face a lot of challenge, because as we see going forward, this will not be the case for Biden, and he has to make negotiations, he has to make settlement deals with a lot of deals on economic front, on his ideological fronts with the Republicans to
I will definitely highlight the ideological fronts as well, because there's a lot of cultural wars going on as well. I'll come back to you later about that. But Mr. Aniq, Zafar, we've just talked about how significant the Senate in itself is, the checks and balance, the power of the Senate, the House of Representatives, and of course judicial power as well. Let's talk about the electoral college system in itself, and the fact that 61% of the Americans are not happy with this system, because the states with a lot of population are able to have the less influence. Every person has less influence in the vote than those states with less population as well. So there's a question mark on the electoral college, because US is the only country with this particular system. What is your take on this?
Number one, let's be clear about it, that the electoral college comes into play for the presidential election. So electoral college is not being disturbed by these elections. Electoral college has its issues, but the framers of the Constitution, US Constitution, had thought at that time, they had this thought that if the power will continue to reside in the states, that are bordering the coastal areas, where most of the population is, which are richer, which have more production.
With due respect, but Aniq Saab, there is a talk about the gerrymandering and the redistricting as well, because of course that many people are saying that the use of legal power to maybe cheat the people.
There are issues in US on redistricting and gerrymandering and voter suppression. These are very, very critical issues. But again, because the states in US have a lot of legislative powers, unlike many other countries where federal structures mean that even the states have to follow the command of the federal government or the central government. In US, states have a lot of legislative powers. They have powers over voting rights. They have power over over redrawing the districts. So these are the battles which continue in US. The system so far has been resilient. They have had in the past such issues. There have been controversies around election results since many elections. Recent elections all had these issues, but I think their system, because of those checks and balances, has that resilience that it comes out and gives results, and ultimately the system accepts. For example, in the last elections, Mr. Trump was trying to sort of make the results controversial, trying to influence even the Republican governors not to certify the results and all that, or the state secretaries not to certify the results. But in the end, even the Republican states where Democrats had won some of the upsets, those were certified by the governments there.
Right. We unfortunately have to move towards the next segment as well, but I want to lastly ask you very briefly. Of course, there are many talks about the cultural wars as well. The Black Lives Matter after George Floyd was killed as well in 2020. And not just that, but also the fact that there was Roe v. Wade, which was overturned as well. So many issues that are coming up and the Democrats want to take up as well. How significant is this midterm election for all of these issues?
Very significant, because the reflection is there. There are many Latinos, many black community representatives who are now in the run-up of elections, and I think this is reflected in the voter mood as well. So I think the culture movement which was built, the Black Lives Matter and the other cultural movements in the United States, because it is a multidimensional society, it is a pluralistic society. And I think the different communities are making their inroads into the political sphere and try to build the public space and build a debate and discussion, which is reflected in this election as well. So some people say these are historically very significant elections because different cultural groups are making inroads into the Senate and the House of Representatives. I think that's important.
Right. Different cultural groups are coming and making their way into the Senate and the House of Representatives as well. But if the gerrymandering still continues, if the redistricting continues as well, and if this continues, then they will be unfortunately trapped in those particular districts and not be able to have more power and more say in the majority as well. But we definitely hope that the United States is going to come back more democratically and more strongly as well. 218 majority they need in the House of Representatives. Let's see what happens. We'll take our short break and be right back with our last topic. Welcome back. Now in our last segment, we're going to talk about the recent interview of the PTI chairperson Imran Khan to TRT Andrea Sankey. And of course, we know that yesterday there was another interview with with the CNN with Becky Anderson. And of course, the same rhetoric was again posed by the PTI chairperson as well. The fact that the baseless allegations continued without any hardcore evidence. And that is what not only Becky Anderson yesterday highlighted, but also Andrea. She asked time and again in the 26 minutes from the PTI chairperson, there were consistent assumptions, but no hardcore evidence that was provided as well. So was this based on his own rhetoric? Was this based on his own assumption and not with a proper flow of investigation and of course hardcore evidence as well? I'm going to go towards Mr. Aniq Zafar Saab. Of course, a lot of rhetoric, a lot of allegations that are baseless as well. Not any investigation being I'm pretty sure he's not going to accept any investigation in this regard as well. But a lot of baseless allegations, no evidence provided. This does not give a bad impression of Pakistan in itself to the international community by going on all these channels and repeating the assumptions?
Of course, there is this issue that Mr. Khan makes baseless allegations and then goes on the international media and repeats them. But fortunately, international media is now counter-questioning him.
Yes.
And I think rest of the world also now knows that he has this habit of shooting from the lip, and he just comes up with the ideas, just throws allegations, contradicts himself, and goes on and on.
The U-turns that he's famous for.
So I think now the world is understanding that what kind of politician Mr. Khan is. He's a rebel rouser. He wants to thrive in conflict and chaos. That is his politics, style of politics. So in yesterday's interview also, what he was trying to do was he was trying to sidestep the question, take the debate to some other topic.
Absolutely.
Not responding to the exact question that what does he want? Does he want the military to support him, or does he want the military to stay out of the politics? Because if he says that he wants the military to stay out of the politics, military leadership has already made it clear that they want to stay out of the politics. They are not going to interfere. So what is Mr. Khan demanding? Mr. Khan has been demanding since the day he was ousted from the government through a democratic process. He has been demanding of the military to side with him, because he is the honest guy, so to speak. We all know that what kind of honest he is. Now there are many stories and evidences that the case may be quite different than what he wants us to believe.
Right, absolutely. The case might be quite different from what he wants us to believe as well. A populistic politics that he's playing as well, which is of course very, very detrimental to the society at large and the fabric of society as well. Of course, let's go to Mr. Amir Hussain now. There was a talk about the economy in this particular conference, the discussion and the interview as well. And of course, there was growth reduction, economic growth reduction during his own tenure. And then he talked about the elections not being held being the cause of the economic detriment in the society. Isn't that ironic that he is contradicting his own self, because the economy at that time in his tenure was really in shambles?
Well, I think economy started to go down in his tenure.
Absolutely.
Up to 3 years and 8 months. You see that what we are now bearing out of all this is now the IMF conditionalities and all that were part of the larger deal. Mr. Khan and his cabinet has not been able to put together an economic agenda other than bashing the opposition and the whole narrative of anti-corruption and all that. Okay, that was important, but that has to have a legal way. But here the economy was not functioning well. And of course, if you talk about the election, we have the 5 years constitutional time frame for the election. So wait for 1 year, because you were ousted through a constitutional measure by the vote of no confidence. It was not a coup. It was not something like that.
It was a legal step.
It was a legal step. It was constitutionally written processes that are there. So I think one thing is that if you want to see stability, you have to wait for 1 year. So because the government has taken some unpopular step in order to improve the economy, in order to set the course of economy. So it will bear some results after some time.
Right.
If you start creating chaos, you start creating instability right now, then we will go into again into a big crisis.
Right, the fact that now there is an IMF deal present as well, and now the economic growth was happening as well, and his rally comes at a time when the economic growth was actually happening. Mr. Aniq, what do you think? That isn't this trying to take back the economy and trying to put a brunt on the economy?
Mr. Khan doesn't care. He has only a single point agenda, and that is that he should be somehow put into power. It does not matter what is the cost to the country, what is the cost to the society, what happens to people on the street, what happens to our daily life. He does not care. He is quite focused on his own agenda.
Right.
It is very, very important right now that the course the current government has taken, reaching out to the world, dealing with China, Saudi Arab, IMF, US, to bring in the required funding and financing that is needed for Pakistan right now.
Right.
So trying to create an atmosphere of instability at this time is actually very, very damaging.
Especially the fact that the Saudi King, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is going to visit Pakistan as well in the end of November, and the fact that a rally is being held when so many important bilateral visits were meant to happen as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Aniq Zafar. Thank you so much for joining us, Amir Hussain Sahab. It was a pleasure to have you. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a time when we go for rallies and create this political chaos, which will, of course, lead to the economic instability in Pakistan as well. Right now, there are so many important deals with China. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif recently went to China as well, and he talked to Xi Jinping as well. And of course, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he's going to come as well in Pakistan and bring so much more investment opportunities for Pakistan as well. This is a time when we talk about our economic uplifting together. The elections will happen next year. That's what the government has said as well. And of course, there's really no point in this rally right now as well. But of course, all we want to do right now is to ensure the collective cohesion of the national unity as well, because that is very, very significant. Staying with our institutions as well, because that is also very significant for the unity of Pakistan as well. Thank you so much for watching Views on News. This is Tayyaba signing off.